Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I'm Ayana Carter, sitting in for Kimberly D'Souza this week. On set, we have Minister of Public Utilities, the Honorable Marvin Gonzales. Good evening, Minister Gonzales, and welcome back to the show.
Good evening, Ayana. It's always a pleasure. I'm happy to be here again.
Minister Gonzales, a lot has been happening within your ministry. So let's begin with the upcoming Caribbean Regional Conference on Water Loss. It's being held right here in TNT. Tell us a little bit about the conference.
So normally these conferences are held in Europe, North America, sometimes Central and South America. This is the first time such a conference will be held in the Caribbean, and Trinidad and Tobago is privileged to be the host country for this first regional Caribbean conference on water loss reduction. And it is important in the context of the transformation of the Water and Sewerage Authority and the transformation that is taking place in the water sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Oftentimes in the past, several of our practitioners will travel to other countries with huge costs to taxpayers to participate in these conferences. And on this occasion, those practitioners, international experts, etc., they are journeying to Trinidad and Tobago to experience our hospitality and to share with our regional partners and our local practitioners on the best practices when non-revenue water management is concerned. And I am very privileged as Minister of Public Utilities on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to be the host country for this first regional conference in the Caribbean.
And how important is this conference and what do you hope to achieve?
This conference is very important because we have not, especially over the last 50 years or so, having spent billions of dollars in the water sector where so many parts of our country continue to experience shortages and lack of supplies for water. And it is unfortunate because we have not, as a country, examined the importance of non-revenue water. Now, what do I mean when I talk about non-revenue water? Simply, it means then that most of the water that is produced by the utility company, a significant portion, of that water does not reach its intended beneficiaries, the different sectors and the various customers, commercial, industrial, and domestic. It is not an issue that is synonymous and that is unique to the Water and Sewerage Authority. But most countries, if not all countries in the Caribbean and water utility companies all over the world, they face this challenge of non-revenue water, water being produced at huge cost to of the people and not reaching its intended beneficiaries. I am told that around the world, utility companies, they expend over $3 or $4 billion. That's the cost to utility companies. So in Trinidad and Tobago, whilst we are about to benefit from a significant capital injection in the water sector to improve the levels of service across Trinidad and Tobago, not only to rehabilitate existing infrastructure and invest in automation, the management of non-revenue water is very, very significant because it means then that most of the water, if not all of the water that we produce, we have to ensure that they get to their intended beneficiaries. Now, there are a number of factors that contribute to non-revenue water. The first is leak on WASA's aging infrastructure. Sometimes you travel around the country and you see burst mains and burst pipelines. That is an example of water that was produced for customers and not reaching its customers. It is wasted because of aging infrastructure. Climate change and evaporation, large volumes of water from our reservoirs, they experience evaporation, condensation, etc. And it is costing the utility company millions of dollars because that water that is being produced, it does not reach its customers. Then there are other factors with respect to uh, customers, illegal customers, hundreds of customers. You might be very surprised, if not thousands of customers or citizens extract water from WASA's distribution system, and they do not pay for the water for varying reasons. Some of them would have paid for their connection and never receive a bill, or their application has not been approved. But what normally would happen is that sometimes they go and they extract the water illegally. So that is an issue. And what we are trying to do in NRW management is to get those customers who are consuming water to be able to be regularized so that they can pay and contribute to the revenue position of the utility company. Insofar as it relates to commercial customers, most of them are not metered, and commercial customers are consumers of large volumes of water. And some of them who are metered, the meters might be faulty, and then the result of that, obviously, is that the utility company does not get the money that it's supposed to get as a result of the volume of water that is consumed by those customers. Those that are not metered, of course, their bills are based on estimation and not necessarily the exact amount of water that they consume, again, resulting in loss of revenue for customers, for the utility company. So there are a number of factors that contribute to non-revenue water, and that's the reason why it is very important that as we seek to bring about that much needed transformation to ensure that we have a sustainable water future for our generation, that we have to look and tackle at the issue of managing our non-revenue water with a view to reducing it so that we can have a more sustainable future and that we can optimize every volume of water that is produced for our citizens.
Now, Minister, let's pivot a little bit to the leak repair program. Can you give us an update on that?
Well, it is going and trending in a very positive direction. I am very pleased to inform you and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that 1 year ago, the backlog of leaks stood at nearly 5,000. You would have heard WASA reporting and the Ministry of Public Utilities reporting at joint select committees and at news conferences the very serious situation across WASA's distribution and transmission grid of a backlog of 5,000 leaks. And we had undertaken a very, very aggressive program to reduce the number of leaks on its transmission and distribution network. As a result of that, I can report that as of today, that backlog of leak has been reduced to zero. And the utility company is now, at this point, responding to current leaks that have been reported over a 5-day period, which currently stands at 500. And they are looking to reduce that by the end of March to zero, thereby positioning the utility company to be able to respond to every report of leak within a period of 24 to 48 hours. That is the guaranteed standard. According to the RIC, we have 5 days, but WASA has set a benchmark that every report of leak must be responded to within a period of 24 to 48 hours. And what we are also doing is that we are introducing technology and automation. And by the start of April, we are launching a leak repair app whereby customers and people with cell phones will now have the capacity to download that app on their mobile phones. And wherever a leak is detected, that can be reported, and the GPS location of that leak will also be forwarded to a main command center. So you're no longer depending on people to call or people to write letters to the editor that there is a leak in a particular location and the utility company is not responding to. But citizens will now have the capacity, based on that app, to report that leak. And once that is reported, WASA will have a location and will respond to that report within a 24 to 48 hour period. And by doing so, Ayana, you are saving the utility company as part of your non-revenue water strategy and management. You are saving the company millions of gallons of water, which can now become available to be distributed to unserved and underserved communities. That is how important it is, because we believe at this point in time, having removed that backlog of 5,000, we are now saving the utility company millions of gallons of water, and this water can now be redistributed to communities that are underserved and unserved.
And as we're speaking of transformation As we all know, WASA is undergoing a huge transformation right now.
Yes.
Where is that process at right now?
The process is moving along smoothly. Let me say that over the last year or so, the transformation has been the subject of court challenges on 2 or 3 occasions by unions representing the workers and employees of the organization. And we have to respect the court's process, and we have to defend the much needed transformation of the authority. So they have been not successful in their challenge towards the transformation, and the court has given the green light on 2 occasions for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to proceed with the transformation. Once that was completed, the transformation plan was finalized by the board. It was submitted to the Ministry of Public Utilities. It was subject to rigorous examination by the cabinet, and the cabinet approved the transformation plan, sent it back to the board for immediate implementation. Soon thereafter, the board, the first phase of the transformation would have moved towards the first phase of the transformation, which is the establishment of that transformation office within the Water and Sewage Authority, and the advertising of executive positions for a changeover of the executive leadership of the organization. During the period November 2022 and January 2023, the board would have, or the authority would have invited applicants for various positions from CEO and general managers in various categories. My understanding is about 9 or 10 senior executive positions that were advertised. My understanding is that numerous persons across the globe, not only in Trinidad and Tobago and within WASA, but regionally and internationally, would have applied for most of the positions, if not all of the positions that were advertised. And the board would have received over 1,000 applications. So they would have been going through the process, all of the applications, ensuring that the most suitable candidates are shortlisted. They went through several interviews and pre-interviews, etc. And I am advised that very soon, perhaps within a month's time, the authority should have its new executive leadership, including a chief executive officer, once the board is of the view that they have the right candidates to fill the executive leadership of the organization. So I look forward to that. Once that second phase is completed, then the other phase would be at the lower end of the management structure, which obviously would impact the bargaining units. And of course, the board and the authority has a responsibility based on the collective bargaining arrangements with the unions representing WASA workers to engage in the necessary consultation before they start implementing this aspect of the transformation. So they are following through with the process. There's no room for error, because if you make any error in the process, it can undermine the entire transformation of the organization. So they have to follow due process. They have to follow the guidance of their experienced counsel, meet with the bargaining units, meet with the unions representing WASA workers, comply with the labor laws, etc., where these transformation exercises are concerned. And I am very confident that things continue to be rolled out smoothly, and I look forward to the entire implementation of the transformation plan.
I'm glad that you mentioned the position of CEO, because of course that has been, in the media for a very long time in terms of when that position will be filled. So I'm glad that you addressed that. As we are all aware, the transformation of WASA is ongoing. What are some of the specific plans or programs that we hope to achieve following the conference that could possibly help with the transformation of WASA?
Coming back to non-revenue water management, let us look at it in the context of the production of more water, the rehabilitation of your infrastructure, the drilling of more wells, the weaning of more surface water sources from your rivers and intakes, etc. If you do not have a proper NRW, non-revenue water strategy, to be able to maximize on that limited resources, then what we are actually pouring and the resources that we are actually pouring into the transformation of WASA, the citizens will not get the benefit. oftentimes you are not optimizing your network to ensure that water reaches all your customers. For example, proper pressure management. A number of our communities, they live on hills, people live on hills, etc. And to get water to some of these hilly terrain, you need pressure from the source to the highest points. But if that pressure is not properly managed, it will cause more deterioration and harm on your network as opposed to getting water. It would increase your leaks on your system because your infrastructure is so deteriorated that it cannot manage the volume of pressure and the PSI that is required to get water to the point where you need to get it. So therefore, to improve upon the resources and to improve upon your levels of service, you may not need wells. You may not need additional booster stations. You may not need pipelines, which of course is a lot of money to invest to get wells and your pipelines, etc. But oftentimes, if you have a good NRW program in place, you maximize upon your existing infrastructure and your existing network. You manage your pressures. You treat with issues of leaks, etc. You get who are your customers, ensuring that those customers are on your database and they are contributing to the revenue of the authority and what have you. And by simply doing all of that, you're examining your hydraulics, examining your pressure profile in all the various locations. All of these strategies, they go towards improving the levels of service. And that's the reason why this conference is very important in the context of the transformation of WASA.
And I know that one of the issues that comes from transformation is water for everyone 24/7. It is something that you have spoken to at
Yes.
length.
Yeah.
Where are we in terms of getting that to that level of service
Yes.
to customers?
When I came in as Minister of Public Utilities, the data, as it were, at that point in time, 2 years ago, is that 32 or 35% of the population enjoyed a 24/7 level of service, 24/7. And then you had, parts of the country getting 24/6, meaning 24 or 6 days a week, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. And it got as bad as some communities, like, for example, in Mayaro, in Ikakas, in parts of in Couva, Freeport, Brasso, some of those areas getting water on a rotational cycle of once every 7 days, once every 9 days. Very unfortunate. So what we are doing in this water improvement program is targeting those communities that get a water supply of 24/3 and below, ensuring that most communities around Trinidad and Tobago get at least a water supply on a rotational basis of 24/4. Because of some of the interventions that we have made under the Community Water Improvement Program, a number of communities across Trinidad and Tobago, the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, a number of those communities that we have targeted for short-term, low-cost capital intervention, they have experienced 24/7 water supply. I can give you the latest communities, a community in Church Street in Matura, never had access to water. And because of the Community Water Improvement Program, we did a pipeline infrastructure and installation program from no access to potable water to 24/7 level of service. Then you have Brickfield in Karapichaima, a community that got water once every 7 days. We did a sewer program where we changed over a pipeline, an undersized pipeline, and put a 4 or 6 inch pipeline. And I would have seen testimonies from some of the people in Brickfield where they are now getting a 24/7 level of service. There are parts in areas in Sangre Grande, Sugar Lane, for example, a community that got water once every 7 days. They are now enjoying a level of service of 24/3 and 24/4. And that is just under the Community Water Improvement Program. Now we are getting access to more sums of money under the IDB and under the public sector investment program, we are now going to roll out that strategy on a wider scale where thousands of people whose level of service at this point in time is under 24.2 or 24.3. We are now targeting those communities for certain infrastructural development to improve their level of service to at least 24.4, perhaps closer to 24.7. But at this point in time, I can tell you, when I inherited the ministry, the population, 34% of the population was receiving a 24/7 water supply. And because of the interventions that we have made in several communities around Trinidad and Tobago over the last 2 years, the latest data is that approximately 51 to 52% of the population now enjoys a 24/7 level of service.
The US $80 million loan has been approved by the IDB. How is this money going to be used, and how soon before we can see improvements?
I am very grateful to the Inter-American Development Bank and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the Ministry of Planning and Development, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Public Utilities, all collaborating in a whole of government approach to getting this, access to this financing from the Inter-American Development Bank to improve water supplies across Trinidad and Tobago. That loan was signed last week, witnessed by the Honorable Prime Minister, and in 2 weeks' time, we will have access to that 80 million. There are certain conditionalities that we have to fulfill, and we are on the cusp of completing these conditionalities so that we can then get access to the loan. The programs to be undertaken. So we are going to be rehabilitating a number of water treatment plants across Trinidad and Tobago, and the construction of new plants, modular water treatment plants, in strategic areas that are served, unserved, and underserved. That is our strategy. As I've said, you have 50% of your population now receiving 24/7 water supply. So it doesn't make any sense that you take this, scarce resource that you call money and apply it to some of those communities. It is better that you target communities that do not have a reliable supply of water. So we have targeted areas in Corland, in Roxborough, in Tobago. We have targeted areas in Freeport. The Freeport water treatment plant is up for major rehabilitation, and we are going to be drilling over 6 wells in the Freeport area, because remember, that is a zone that has approximately 23,000 citizens receiving a level of service of once every 7 days or once every 9 days. So our strategy on the first loan operation of $80 million is to drill about 6 wells in the Freeport catchment area, increasing water production, rehabilitating the Freeport water treatment plant to be able to have the capacity to treat that water, and increasing their levels of service to a minimum of 24/7. So that's in Freeport alone, almost 24,000 people will stand to benefit from what we intend to do. And then we're going to be moving to Sangre Grande, where a number of wells are going to be rehabilitated and drilled to improve water supply in the Sangre Grande area. We'll be moving to Chatham in Point Fortin, an area that is unserved and underserved. Again, approximately 25,000 people not getting a reliable supply of water. So based on the work that we are about to undertake in those areas in Point Fortin, in Freeport, in Sangre Grande, in Tobago, pipeline infrastructure, replacement of aging pipelines, the deployment of automation, the institutional strengthening of the Water and Sewage Authority and the Ministry of Public Utilities, we expect over 1.2 million citizens to benefit from this first loan operation of $80 million, and a significant improvement in the supply of water to many communities across Trinidad and Tobago. And I look forward to that.
All right. And I know a lot of the residents in those areas are really looking forward to it as well. So
yes,
we'll see what happens.
Yes, and the intention is to eliminate water schedule that is 24/2 and below, 24/3 and below. Our view that it is unacceptable that you have so many communities on a water schedule of once every week, once every 7 days or 9 days. It is just unacceptable. And therefore, we are using the resources that we're getting from the IDB to target those communities to ensure that all of those communities can be improved insofar as it relates to their water supply. And across the board, all of our communities and all of our citizens can have a water supply. As we move closer to 24/7, we have to ensure that at least most communities on a 24/4 rotational basis, and we will continue our improvements to get most communities closer to a 24/7 level of service. So there are other areas that will stand to benefit from this first loan operation. We have the Guanapo water treatment plant that is responsible for serving the vast majority of the town of Arima. Again, over 20,000 citizens will stand to benefit. That plant is up for upgrading, and we are seeking to increase its production capacity by 1 million gallons of water per day. And we expect, based on the hydraulic modeling that was done by the experts by WASA at WASA, we anticipate that most of the communities in the area of Arima and environs will receive a 24/7 water supply by the upgrading of that Guanapo water treatment plant. And then you have the North Urupuch water treatment plant that is responsible for providing over 125,000 citizens in East Trinidad from Manzanilla, Sangre Grande, Santa Rosa, La Joqueta, Malabar, in parts of Malabar and parts of Maloney and Five Rivers, Piaco, all of these areas, Aruca, they will stand to benefit from the upgrading of the North Urupuch water treatment plant. And we expect as well that those communities will move closer to a 24/7 level of service. And then in the Maraval area, the Maraval water treatment plant is a plant that is perhaps the oldest plant in Trinidad and Tobago, constructed somewhere around 1850, has never undergone any major rehabilitation. And we expect to undertake major refurbishment of the Maraval water treatment plant. And by so doing, we will increase water production at that plant, resulting in an improvement in the water supply to the people of Lower Maraval, Port of Spain, and environs.
So we've spoken a lot about WASA.
Yes.
Now we're going to switch to TNTech. And we have to address the issue that happened on Wednesday at the meeting of the Regulated Industries Commission in Centerpoint Mall in Chaguanas. It was ended prematurely. Unfortunately. What can you tell us about that situation? What are your comments?
Ever since when the consultation began by the RIC, I recognize that there are certain political operators that intended to go there and cause disruption. They are members of parliament, both in the lower and upper house. They have galvanized a lot of their supporters to go there and not participate in real consultation, but to engage in disruptive behavior, thereby depriving citizens who go there to consult and to ask legitimate questions of the folks at the RIC so that they can understand the issues faced by TNTech and what it is intended for that rate review. And the behavior of some of these members of parliament and people who ought to know better, political operators, I must say, it is very, very disheartening, very disappointing, and I would dare say disgusting and not befitting of the office that they hold. The RIC process is a process that is laid down in law and the governing legislation for the operation of the Regulated Industries Commission. It is an independent commission that was set up to examine the operations of our utility sector, especially our water utility and our electricity utility. It is the sole body that is responsible for conducting rate review. As a matter of fact, the law mandates that the RIC should undertake a rate review for water and electricity every 5 years. The last time a rate review was conducted for water in Trinidad and Tobago was 1993. And the last time it was done for electricity was 2006 and 2007. So the RIC has not been following the law robustly to review the rates of water and electricity, because in Trinidad and Tobago, these things are always mired in political controversy, where political parties in the past were afraid to review and to allow for the review of the rates for water and electricity because it was always seen as a political lightning rod that can cost the ruling party, their stay in governance. But sometimes when we do that and we delay what's supposed to be done at the appropriate time, it is oftentimes to the detriment of the utility services and by extension, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because if your water and your electricity services cannot provide a reliable supply to the citizen and to the country, then it is the citizen that stand to be disadvantaged as a result of that. So therefore, coming back to your question, as minister and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I feel very sad. I am very concerned about the safety of the folks at the RIC and the professionals there who have worked so hard to get to this point. And I ask that the national security forces, they examine what is taking place so that they can go to the respective locations to ensure that law and order is maintained. To those citizens who are allowing themselves to be used by political operatives and members of parliament, I am asking them kindly to allow good sense to prevail. We can do better as a country. We have to represent and we have to show a better example to our youth and our young people who are crying out for leadership and crying out for role models. And when they see our political operators and political leaders behaving in this kind of manner, it cannot and it will not augur well for the governance and the future of Trinidad and Tobago. I ask the RIC, do not lose hope, do not be intimidated. Continue to be truthful and loyal to their oath of office and not be intimidated. Continue to do their work and to do it resolutely. And at the end, their work will be passed on to the requisite state agency and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and a decision will be made. But do not cower and do not, back down in the face of what obviously is intimidatory tactics and thuggery by some sectors in the national community.
Will the residents and business owners have another opportunity to voice their concerns?
Well, I've seen a release from the RIC, and the RIC has indicated emphatically that they will not be intimidated and that they will continue the consultation process across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. And I was very heartened to see that they have taken that position, because it is quite easy, especially where national security is on the minds of most citizens of this country. It is very easy for the professionals at the RIC to say that they cannot continue operating in this very hostile environment that was deliberately created by some political operators in Trinidad and Tobago. So I was very heartened to see that release, and I assure all sectors and stakeholders who are genuinely interested in consultation and asking legitimate questions of the RIC. I was very heartened that, given the stance of the RIC to continue this process, that they will be provided with an opportunity. And in addition to some of these public consultations, they can submit their recommendations, submit their concerns in writing. We have an email address, and there's a portal that was set up for members of the public to engage the RIC electronically and ask legitimate questions. And I ask all stakeholders to utilize these electronic platforms to engage the Regulated Industries Commission on the issue of the rate review for electricity in Trinidad and Tobago.
So, Minister, you mentioned that WASA has not had a review or consultations since 1993, TNTEC in 2006. But the public, some members of the public are still saying that they disagree with any proposed rate increase for either of the two utilities. What are your comments on that?
That is quite understandable. There are a number of reasons why people will not want an increase. I don't think the citizens will ever agree to a rate increase in water and electricity, even though in Trinidad and Tobago we have the lowest rate for water in the entire Americas and perhaps the entire globe, as well as electricity. We have the lowest rates for electricity around the world. And in addition to enjoying the low rates for water and electricity, there are a number of subventions that are available for citizens and that citizens benefit from that further reduce the price that they pay for electricity. For example, we have our rate rebate system and rate rebate program, where citizens whose bill are $300 and below, they are automatically entitled to a 35% rebate on that bill. On an annual basis, over 220,000 citizens benefit from that. So you have the lowest rate for electricity, and yet still over 220,000 citizens benefiting from your bill rebate program to the tune of $68 million per year on the part of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Then we have our bill assistance program, utility bill assistance program, where pensioners and other vulnerable groups who simply cannot even afford to pay their water and electricity, millions of dollars spent on an annual basis by the government of Trinidad and Tobago to pay the bills for some of these citizens. And I'm told over the last 5 years, over 70,000 citizens benefited from our bill assistance program or water tank assistance program. The over 220,000 citizens have said benefiting from our bill rebate program, etc. The cost for gas. TNTech is owing NGC over $5 billion because TNTech is unable to pay NGC for the gas that is consumed for the generation of electricity. All right, and the price of that gas is also subsidized. So NGC selling that gas to their petchem industries and their international partners, getting that gas at market price, it benefits significantly as opposed to selling the gas to TNTech at way below market price at a subsidized rate. So the government is also subsidizing the price that TNTech purchased the gas from NGC to the tune of billions of dollars on an annual basis. So the gas is subsidized, the government is subsidizing the cost of gas at the production stage. Then the gas is used to generate electricity. The electricity is sold to customers. Again, further subsidy applies. Then subsidies apply to over 220,000 domestic customers to the tune of almost $70 million per year. Then it is further subsidized by vulnerable groups who simply cannot pay for water and electricity. So we have a subsidy arrangement in place to protect the weak and the vulnerable citizens in the country. So TNTech rather is saying that we are desperately in need of a rate review, because if we don't get that, we will not be in a financial position to undertake the necessary rehabilitation and preventative and routine maintenance on our electricity infrastructure, which can compromise the reliability of service to our customers. It means that we will not be able to purchase gas, and that's TNTech, from the NGC in order to generate electricity. So the company is in a very precarious financial position and is saying that this rate review is very important for the next 10, 15, or 20 years to ensure the financial sustainability of the utility company to be able to provide a reliable electricity service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government is saying, allow the RIC, which is an independent body, to do its work in accordance with the RIC Act, to recommend an appropriate rate for electricity to the government. And if in the event that there is an increase in the price of electricity, the government is undertaking to introduce a utility card system targeting customers and domestic customers who may need the protection and the assistance of the state to continue to have affordable water and electricity services. So the government is saying, if the price of electricity were to increase, we will protect the most vulnerable citizens by introducing this utility card where the government will pay a substantial portion of that bill. So customers are given the further guarantee. Whilst yes, the rate review will improve the financial performance of the utility services so that they can provide the customers of Trinidad and Tobago with a more reliable service, the weak and the vulnerable citizens who require this protection of the state, they will be taken care of by the introduction of a utility card program.
We've learned recently that MTS is owed $620 million,
Yes.
and the Ministry of Education owes a substantial portion of that. And that is a problem also facing WASA
TNTech.
and TNTech.
Yes.
Monies owed to them by both private and public sector companies. So, will this affect the overall, or has it affected the overall operations of these companies?
It has impacted because, again, this is much needed revenue that can be utilized by MTS, by TNTech, by WASA to improve the levels of service across Trinidad and Tobago. Certainly, if WASA were to receive all the monies owed it by its customers, whilst it will improve and put it in a position to be able to undertake some critical maintenance on its infrastructure, it certainly will not be enough to do it on a wide scale because of the amount of resources, financial resources that are needed to do that on a national level. That's the reason why we're going to the IDB to get additional funding. The same for TNTech, MTS. However, over the last year or so, the government, having seen an improvement in the financial performance of the country, increased revenue as a result of increased prices for gas and for oil, the government has made a concerted effort to allow state enterprises, ministries, etc., to settle outstanding arrears to TNTech, WASA, and MTS. And the Ministry of Public Utilities would be in constant communication with our stakeholders in ministries and state agencies, working towards ensuring that the outstanding arrears to these state agencies, MTS, WASA, and TNTech, those arrears are settled in a timely manner. And over the last year, we have seen a dramatic improvement. Remember, 2 years ago, we have been battling the pandemic. A lot of our resources have been utilized in the Ministry of Health to protect our citizens, to ensure that we have life, to ensure that we have vaccines, to ensure that we have hospitals to treat with so many of our citizens who have fallen to and that were impacted or infected by this virus. And unfortunately, the government was not in a financial position to continue to allow support to many of our state enterprises to settle outstanding arrears to WASA, TNTech, and MTS. And of course, the price of gas and the price of oil was very low, and the government's revenue position was not very healthy. But we have seen improvement over the last year, and a result of that, we are seeing a concerted effort on the part of all of these entities to settle outstanding arrears. And I am hoping that in this financial year, moving towards 2024, we will continue to see this trend where state agencies and public sector bodies are making a better effort to settle these outstanding arrears. And once that is done, we will see an improved financial performance on the part of the utility services and MTS.
Okay, Minister, so as we go, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes. So I'm very excited about the future of the Ministry of Public Utilities. Over the last year, we have done a lot of work. We have completed our strategic action plan for improving water supply across Trinidad and Tobago. And as a result of that strategic action plan, it resulted in the successful negotiation of a loan with the Inter-American Development Bank for a first loan operation of $80 million to improve the levels of service of water services across Trinidad and Tobago, thereby benefiting 1.3 million citizens. That's in the water sector. We've also approved an integrated water resource management policy, which will also be ratified at the Regional Water Laws Conference, which is on the 23rd of March 2023. And I'm looking forward to that. This is the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago we have approved an integrated water resource management policy to ensure that we have a safe water security over the next 20 years for future generations in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm looking forward to the successful outcome of the rate review to allow TNTech to be a sustainable electricity company providing strong electricity services, reliable electricity services to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have also done a lot of work where waste management is concerned. And as I said that, we are about to go before Cabinet in a week's time with the beverage container legislation and policy, with an integrated waste management policy, as well as a recycling policy for Trinidad and Tobago. And we are looking at restructuring the solid waste management company of Trinidad and Tobago. And you are going to see a lot of work taking place in the area of solid waste management in Trinidad and Tobago that will stimulate economic development and ensuring that we have environmental protection and environmental sustainability. So it is indeed a very exciting time for the Ministry of Public Utilities, and I look forward to the next 12 months where a lot will be happening to move the development agenda for Trinidad and Tobago.
And that's our show. Thank you, Minister Gonzales, for joining us this evening. Join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I'm Ayana Carter, and from all of us here, have a good night.